Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gill Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. I'm not sure this qualifies as an emergency podcast. I don't know. It's kind of in the middle, but we recorded yesterday, and so much happened in the last 11 hours. We were going to post it this morning, and instead we are re-recording because we were relying on Novak Djokovic to kind of get through Taylor Fritz without really any big drama or headlines. And that didn't happen, did it, Amy?
Yeah, and it's so funny because I was going to write the summaries and I procrastinated, and I texted Gil last night, I'll do it in the morning. I'm so glad I procrastinated because everything is all upside down now. We've got some wounded goats, guys. We've got Djokovic slipping on the Melbourne paint area of the court and injuring his side as he just barely gets through a 5-set match with Taylor Fritz. And I don't know, slipping on Melbourne, in Melbourne, a place where he's been so comfortable. Would you call it ironic, Joel? Would you call it cinematic? You're the wordsmith.
It definitely has its cinematic quality. It's like I was thinking about that. Some people slip in Melbourne. He slipped on Melbourne. And I remember a few years ago, Serena Williams and her mother were not pleased with her court positioning on the court. And I forget exactly the location of the Melbourne letters, but the mother said, "Get out of Melbourne. Don't linger back there." So I guess the case is made for court positioning and moving up onto the baseline. But I think it's just unfortunate. It's interesting how these things happen. This is the sports for you. We think it's going to happen. It's organized. Yeah. The guy's a favorite. He's a better player. He's won a lot. And then something like that, and it changes the flow of the match.
It reminds me of how you can't get into Long Island, New York. You can only get on it. That's what came up for me there. But Djokovic slips. He was moving to his right, and I'm fairly certain, I don't think that I need to be a doctor on the court. His right oblique seemed to be the issue because he could not rotate on his forehand. So that's a leftward hip rotation. The center of that movement is the right oblique. Meanwhile, he had no problem serving. He had no problem hitting a backhand. That is the left oblique. So now throughout this match with Taylor Fritz, he basically can't move to his right. He can't really hit a return of serve, but his serve is fine. His backhand is fine. It wasn't until the 5th set where, he took pain medication and he started feeling well enough to hit out and kind of rotate on his forehand just enough. And he got past the finish line. It was quite miraculous. Joel, what did you make of that 5th set?
Well, look, you see Novak in that 5th set, he got in 73% of his first serve. So he probably was really aware of what he needed to take care of. And on the other hand, there's Fritz serving at 2-3, 30 love. So he's pretty close to then, we're 3-all in the 5th. And yet Novak, look, this is the thing with these players. I mean, Novak, this is his 43rd 5-setter of his career, 32-10 in 5-setters. So he's quite experienced. And maybe that proved the difference of how well Novak was able to just grab the moment, hit out on a few forehands, and just kind of snatch the match, as he had so many times.
It was the coiling that seemed to, you're right, Gil, on the coiling for the forehand he would grimace after he had to do that. But he put himself through the pain a few times because he knew he had to, and he hit some killer forehands. How many times have we seen this wounded warrior in the middle of a match, and then it's almost like you just know that the other guy is going to be somehow affected by that, and that the wounded warrior is going to come out on top. We've seen it with Novak dozens of times.
We have, and that was kind of the sentiment, like, how we've seen this movie before. Well, my one issue with that is it's not as if Novak playing a horrible level for 2 sets helped him win the match, right? I mean, he is at his base level better than Taylor Fritz. He was up 2-0. Then he got injured. Then he dropped sets. So it's not as if the injury it's not as if it helped him win. It in a way it hurt him win.
I'll tell you one thing that did help him, Gil, in watching the match was when midnight struck and they had to get all the fans out of there because of the governmental regulations for COVID now. That's the other thing that's happened in the last 11 hours. And the fans were upset that they had to leave. I mean, who wouldn't be? But they got him out of there in about 7 or 8 minutes. Djokovic needed that time to, gather himself, to get treatment, to relax a little bit. And that to me was pivotal.
It reminds me of times at this tournament when they've had the Australia Day celebration on January 26th, and there are fireworks going on. And suddenly there's like a mid-match delay. I can't cite a specific match where a player was then aided by that and turned things around, but it's just interesting how these things occur in sports. And I think, boy, this is a year of unpredictability. I mean, crowds, no crowds, adjustments, tests, the very fact that now there's a COVID going in Melbourne and how that affects the city and the climate. And you just think of all the things people are going through. I mean, this is just kind of the beginning of what's going to be. This is going to be quite the year of unpredictability.
Yeah, well, you can't predict Novak Djokovic suffering this injury at the Australian Open, where he's been so healthy throughout his career. It's in sharp contrast to Rafael Nadal. And I know in our last podcast, I talked about how I have gathered Nadal's Aussie Open injury history, and I couldn't pull it up. So let me just throw it out there right now. He missed the tournament in 2006. He missed it in 2013. He lost to Federer in 2011, dealing with an abdominal injury. Lost to Wawrinka in 2014 in the final with a stiff back, and withdrew against Cilic in 2018. And I could be missing some here. So Nadal, this has been kind of a tournament of bad fortune for Nadal on the injury front. Djokovic has been so consistent here. Obviously with the 8 titles, but now you're right, Amy, the way you started off the show, that's kind of what I was thinking of. Boy, here we are with our 3. Federer is on the shelf. Nadal has a back injury, and now Djokovic has this oblique thing. And I mean, no one's healthy. And this is kind of what happens when you have players at this age.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that Rafa is suffering these injuries at the start of the season when he's had time off? I mean, it's almost counterintuitive. And then, once clay season rolls around, he seems absolutely fine. So I don't know if it's something with his training or if he's, doing something funky there. But I do know, and I said this in the previous, that back injuries, because I've struggled with back injuries my entire life, and it can be a strain, it can be a herniated disc. They can leave as quickly as they came on. So there's hope. There's hope for him. And now with an injured Djokovic, this is really an open tournament.
But the uncertainty of the injuries is so disturbing. It's so tricky for a player because they don't know, and then you go to sleep. And I think you've told me, Amy, about how with a back injury, your sleep can be compromised.
Oh, it's terrible.
And so,
yeah.
But for Nadal, I think, I'm not sure whether it's his training or just hard courts themselves. Hard courts themselves exert a toll on him. And I also think, these players, all these players, particularly the great players, are such creatures of their habits and rituals. I mean, this is Novak's Roland Garros. Rafa has Roland Garros, and he loves that clay season. He loves playing along the Mediterranean. I mean, you instantly see how comfortable he is upon arrival in Monte Carlo every spring. I mean, and that whole European stretch, and that's Rafa country. And Novak, while there aren't that many Australian Open tune-ups given the time of the year, you see how dialed in he is to the hard courts and the controlled bounce. We've spoken about Novak's discipline in the past, and I think hard courts like this reward a certain kind of discipline. Andre Agassi loved playing at the Australian Open too. You play the bounce, there's a control, hit the ball. Very good for people who are controlling things that way.
Yeah. Well, I guess one difference is, and you try not to speculate on the severity of both injuries. Djokovic is concerned that he tore his left oblique, which, you don't need to be a doctor to know that that would be a really, really difficult injury to play through. So, we'll see, and we'll see if he does imaging or not. But one thing is that, as Novak has kind of struggled through his first couple matches on, in terms of the score lines, Nadal, despite being, dealing with the back issue, which he says is still not where he'd want it to be, he's kind of blowing his opponents out, including Michael Mmoh in the second round. So I would ask, what did you think that Nadal was at a fairly high level against Mmoh?
I did. I mean, I thought that here's a guy who doesn't have his normal spring in his step, and yet he was in complete control over the match of a young guy with legs and absolutely healthy body, cut, and yet he could completely dictate. So I would much rather be in Rafa's shoes right now, where the injury is not in the acute phase, because that's the bad time, when it just happened.
Nadal wasn't really tested by those opponents. They weren't that skilled players, and so he's in control of them quite well. I think what's interesting with our three, we've spoken about this, about how they focus and what they bring. And I think Nadal always finds this transcendental level of engagement that matters most of all. I mean, that kind of is going to and it fits into the thing you've talked to me before, Gil, about suffering. It's like, okay, so I've got some pain. That's part of it too. And you just, there's Nadal is such the warrior. Novak is so disciplined in his way. Roger with his artistry. It's interesting how they each bring their skills to it. And the fighting qualities, I mean, we'll see. Obviously, we'll just have to see what this injury really is for Nadal, for both these guys.
Can I just say something about, maybe you guys know the answer to this, but is it really necessary to have that painted on the court, the city name? I mean, I know it's good for like recognition on television, but tennis is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Can't we do it like virtually? Or, I mean,
well,
you guys tell me.
Well, let me.
Yeah.
My assumption is that the fact that he was on the Melbourne paint had nothing to do with his slip, right? I think if that was, and we've seen it on clay, that the lines are more slippery than the rest of the court, and we've seen that consistently. I think if the white paint was actually a lot more slippery than the blue paint, I think we'd see this kind of thing more often. So my thought is that it was a coincidence.
Well, maybe we're going to measure the distance, and we'll have to look in a year and see where the words Melbourne are located a year from now. or if they do that again, because it's been there for years. That's a great point, Amy, and your point is a great one. It's like, why can't it be done graphically the way we see things in football games?
Mm-hmm.
And all
I mean,
that?
I've definitely been on a hard court where the lines get slippery when it starts to drizzle or when it's super, super humid out, but that didn't seem to be a factor. If there's any question at all, why don't we fix it? I don't know.
There will be some kind of subtle exploration. I mean, I think things go on. This is where agents examine every part of that, and they'll say, "Hey, wait a second. That these letters, was that slick? Did that help trigger the injury, or not?" And so we'll see. Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be there. Of course, it doesn't have to be there. It's there for business.
They got to get rid of those advertising boards that are in front of the lines judges that sometimes players, I mean, that is completely unnecessary. Now, the
Thanasi Kokkinakis at Monte Carlo, remember when he tripped on that Maui gym? It's like a block out there. I mean, it's so outrageous. Unnecessary.
Yeah. What line judges? We're not going to have line judges.
True enough.
They're not line judges. They're going to go the way of the white ball.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. The courts are slicker this year. I mean, let's throw that out there. It's faster.
They're faster. I don't know. We've talked about sand on the courts. Yeah, I guess if it's faster, I don't know what
there would be less sand.
There'd be less sand, but less grip. But again, these are newly surfaced fast courts. These aren't my worn down public park, hockey rink kind of courts.
Right. Now, I don't, you can't take all this as gospel. I did hear a commentator make that declaration that the courts are not as grippy as they once were. But, again, it's really hard to draw very confident conclusions about that. But of course, yeah, the court is faster. And then we have the no crowd thing. And we hit on it a little bit at the top. This was another thing that Djokovic was kind of battling at the beginning of the Fritz match, as he was kind of getting into it with the crowd a bit. And it's kind of back to the end of 2020, right? It just feels like we're going back in time. I don't know how much of an effect this will have on the players, because I feel like they're probably already used to this.
Now, I didn't see the beginning of the match. I was watching the Kyrgios team match, which was a real humdinger. Why was the crowd getting into it with Djokovic? I mean, with all the Australian Opens that Djokovic has won, why wouldn't they be behind him?
I think it was a small but loud group that Novak was paying attention to. And
okay.
I know that I think after he won the first set, he looked right at them and let out a huge fist pump. So it was just, they were going at it a little bit. I think Djokovic actually likes that and kind of enjoys that. But maybe the crowd was also rooting for more tennis in the third set, getting behind.
The crowd was just rooting. I mean, I think fans are happy to be back at sports events, and they want to be in on it. And they've been kind of deprived, and remember, this is a city that endured a 111-day lockdown. So and this is a festive city, a friendly city. So they're having a chance to enjoy themselves, and it's sort of intimate. It's not as packed a stadium as customary. So here's a chance to almost be even more visible and kind of make contact with the player. And I think for the players, the impact of this, it's singular, whether it's crowds or no crowds, but it's also just this overtone of uncertainty and dread in the world of what's going on, of what's happening from week to week, and whether it's their people, whether or not, it's all a sign of why is this happening, and we all know why this is happening. It's why, because of the pandemic, and that's the big cloud cover of all of this, and how's it going to go, and where are we going to be, and then for these folks who travel so much, and airports and hotels, I mean, think how many times are these players going to be tested over the next 10 months? I mean, constant, and am I positive? What's going on? All of that.
Yeah, I think of Madison Keys, who was headed to the Australian Open, and she went from Florida to Los Angeles to get on that plane and tested positive. All the training, all the preparation, she had to turn around and go back to Florida.
Right.
It's a really, really difficult situation to think about. And yeah, I mean, we talk about a crazy scene, the fans leaving in the middle of the match, in the middle of that the Djokovic Fritz match. Very kind of jarring, especially because I kind of got used to crowd noise really quickly here.
Yeah,
in this tournament.
I did too. I mean, I was like watching that Kyrgios team match. I was like, yeah, it's as it should be. It's like as it's always has been. And then I kept thinking to myself, but this could be it. It could be it.
Yeah. Well, it didn't demotivate Novak, that's for sure. That just goes to show, it completely comes from within for him. And he was really emotional after the match about the win, because I think that obviously it was a real struggle for him on the court tonight. What is I do wonder kind of what the decision-making process will be like for him about, taking the court against Raonic if he's not going to be 100%. And I do wonder if, I think that the three probably all have different mindsets about that. And Federer, of course, has that kind of record of never retiring during a match. And I'm just curious to see how Djokovic plays this. I'm a little bit skeptical, if to predict that everything's going to be fine and dandy for the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, if it's a tear, he should get imaging. I'm just going to go out there and hopefully he will. If it's a tear, then he maybe ought to consider withdrawing, as much as I hate to say that. If it's not, Off the top of my head, I don't know his record against Raonic, but I feel like it's pretty doggone good. You know, he's got the beat on that guy. So it's hard to say, Gil. It really is. I mean, what we should be thinking about after the Kyrgios team match and team surviving that in 5 sets and the way he did, we should be thinking, is it another opportunity for him with an injured Rafa and an injured Novak?
Well, absolutely. It's an opportunity for him and the most recent, well, not the most recent new major winner. And knowing that these guys might be hindered, and we're going to see, I guess we're just going to have to see what this really is with Novak, how extensive the injury is. And the amazing thing is, not the amazing thing is, these guys have such engaged pit crews, you know, people who monitor everything. And Novak has brought that to a new state of the art. I mean, Martina Navratilova and Ivan Lendl kind of started it, and Novak has brought it to a whole 21st century level of measurement and care and sophistication and his own fitness and what he eats and what he drinks. So I think we're just going to have to see what this injury is. And I think it would take a lot for him to withdraw before the match happens. That would have to be a major injury and a doctor making a significant recommendation. So I'd be very surprised if he doesn't take the court. Then we'll have to see.
Djokovic is 11-0 lifetime against Raonic, so it's
there you
tremendous.
go.
Yeah, it has not been a competitive head-to-head at all. Man, though, there's a lot at stake. I mean, Djokovic went through a stretch where he won 5 of 7 majors, from the 2018 Wimbledon to the 2020 Australian Open, and now things are looking very complicated. If he wants to win this tournament, that would be 0 for his last 3. One was a regular, just plain old loss, the final against Nadal at Roland Garros. But then you have the default against PCB, and it could be an injury that seals his fate here. Not to mention, you had the Stan Wawrinka shoulder injury, knock him out of the U.S. Open a little bit recently. So there have been not a lot of normal losses, and that was last year in the 4th round of the U.S. Open. Or now it was 2 years ago, because that was 2019. There's been a lot of strange defeats for Novak that just have not, or it's not necessarily strange outside of PCB, but it's not just a regular, well, the opponent won 3 sets.
I think we had kind of gotten used to that, you know, and we like to think of these guys as so predictable. But Joel's right. You know, sports, it rarely ever goes to script. So it's going to be really interesting with the change up of fans, and with no fans, will that benefit Novak? Will it hurt Nadal? You know, it's going to be really interesting to see.
Right. Well, sports is one of the things where surprise isn't bad for you. In most parts of life, surprise is less than good. And in other parts of sports, things happen in their ways. And Novak, remember, before his grand ascent in 2011, before he changed his whole diet and everything, he had withdrawals, he had health things, he had certain things going on, and he fixed that. And then things have happened. Yeah, things have happened, and it's kind of a number of them, and then they're each kind of quirky. Yeah, like the Wawrinka retirement, and then he's had in 2016, Wawrinka beat him in the U.S. Open final after Novak had won a incredibly it was hot off the charts at the 2016 U.S. Open. I think it was more than 100 degrees on the court when he beats Monfils in the semis. So it's just part of his journey. And here he is, though, still winning these majors, winning this tournament 8 times, still the favorite to win this title, I would think. Wouldn't you guys still think he's the favorite to win the title?
No, not necessarily, depending on the injury. We'll probably know by the end of the day. But
who is, if we're going to do that?
Maybe
Medvedev.
Right now, you say it's Medvedev is the favorite to win the title at this minute?
I might say it's team.
For me.
Okay. All right.
But you guys, this just reminds me of something that it's been bothering me. The feeds that you guys watching, are you getting these win prediction things? Where it's
that is driving me crazy. Oh my God. Yes.
Useless, completely useless. I mean, first of all, how often is it wrong? And secondly, it's like, well, it said that team was going to win. Now it's saying now it's saying Kyrgios is going to win. It flips. The prediction flips. It's the most useless thing. It actually makes me angry.
You want to see John King from CNN come out and start projecting who's going to win? And he's got like the map of the player. I don't know.
That's an insult to John King. I mean, I just think it's like there's a favorite, and we know that going into the match. So, what a prediction?
Well, all these gambits designed to engage audiences. I think. I mean, I think that's kind of a whole deal, and I think, yeah. I agree. If I've seen those, I don't pay attention to that stuff.
Okay, it doesn't seem to translate to tennis. I've seen it in other sports, and it's based on the situation. I think it makes sense. Like in basketball, perhaps it's okay. Well, a team down 9 with 2 minutes left has this probability of winning. And that I kind of like. It's like, oh, well, that situation is really hard to come back from. In tennis, it seems to, I don't know how they're coming to these numbers, Amy. And I don't think it's like that. I think
the algorithm's off. Yeah.
But even if it was correct, they're not expanding on what these numbers are. They're just saying win predictor. Like for all we know, this could be someone in the truck who they've deemed the
right.
I'm sure it's not that, but who knows?
But the win predictor is never held accountable, Gill. Like, well, going into the match, you said he had a 92% chance. Now you're saying that he's only got a 5% chance. I mean, we need to hold you accountable, win predictor.
Well, name one. This is why I'm not a big fan of predictions, because there isn't any accountability. So in other words, if someone makes some prediction, whether it's a career, a tournament, a match, and it's right. Oh, see, look what but there's an accountability. That's why I think predictions, it's all this outcome based. I mean, I enjoy engaging with process, not just like, what can he win a slam? That's not the point. What needs to happen for him to win a slam? What occurs and what's going on? And that's why right now Novak's injury has kind of thrown uncertainty.
Well, the accountability is in the YouTube comments, Joel. You get some heat when you get it wrong. That's the accountability.
Oh, yeah, he gets some heat, right?
Yeah.
I guess I don't like treating athletes like they're stocks.
Right.
They're commodities. That's
either.
I agree. Well, also, I think this topic just kind of brings us to this larger point. I get asked all the time to predict the slam race, basically every major. And it's always, I can't predict the slam race because you can't predict longevity, and you can't predict things like what just happened when Djokovic just played Taylor Fritz. You can't predict this.
Predict short term. You can't even predict short term. I mean, I think right. I know people like to ask that stuff like they're just tallying, and it's the wrong question. I mean, you guys, I'm very big. I think what's the real question here? Like, who's going to win the slam title? And is that going to make them the greatest ever? Well, it doesn't mean it's meaningless. And then there are all these other players in the history of the game that are A+ players. I mean, it's just so different, that kind of stuff.
And, for the last, 6 months that Roger has been injured, people have been saying, well, Novak's going to take it over now, the slam tally, or Rafa's going to take it over now, the slam tally. Well, look at it now. It's really up in the air, isn't it?
Well, it's always up in the air. And it's always up in the air. That's why it's sports. That's what's fun about it. That's what's fun about watching sports things. It's guys who win and new people. And once upon a time, everybody was nobody. 6 months ago, Dominic Thiem had never won a major. Now he's won a major. So in a while, we're going to wonder, is he going to win a second, or who knows? And I think it's interesting to see, particularly during this pandemic, how we gain things from sports that way and what that means to us. I mean, for example, you see how much of a cry of happiness there was for a lot of people seeing Tom Brady win a 7th Super Bowl. That was really gratifying for a lot of people who love Tom Brady and love seeing great athletes do great things. And maybe that's even more cherished during this time of global uncertainty. So much of our world is uncertain now. So here's a chance. Okay, well, Tom Brady always right with the world. for this moment.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. All right, let's end on this. Okay, it's going to be Djokovic and Raonic in the fourth round, and it's such an unpredictable situation with Djokovic. We'll see how that plays out. Nadal and Cam Norrie that's a third round match, so we're a little bit staggered here. Nadal, we talked about how good he looked against Mo. He did look good, but his first serve average, due to his back, was 111 miles per hour, way down. You could see he's holding back. So I guess the question is, how much longer can Nadal get away with really rolling in his first serve?
Well, I wrote a piece for 538 that Nadal is pretty much king of second serve. His winning percentages on second serve are just astronomical compared to other people. So, does he really need a fast serve? Maybe not.
How much he can, well, this is going to be opponent driven. This is going to be driven by what they recognize and what they're able to do with the ball and the speed of the court and their own skill set and what they bring to it.
It's also conditions driven. He always takes some off on clay, and he, it's easy money
Ups
for him
the
to do that, but on a quicker.
Yeah, you can spot serve. But, he's also, king of location too. So there's a lot he can do.
Well, that is for sure. There is a lot he can do. Okay, we will see how it plays out with our wounded Nadal, wounded Djokovic, and but their greatness shines through it when we kind of watch them work through these things. So we'll continue to monitor. That'll do it for this episode of 3. Make sure to like the video on YouTube, leave a comment, and subscribe. We are also available on all podcast platforms, and we greatly appreciate it if you leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. And we will see you next time on the next episode of 3.